Rob Cassleman served as a men's and women's track and field cross country coach for over 25 years, serving as a collegiate, high school, and developmental levels. He coached at Big Ten, Pac-10, and Mid-American conference schools in addition to a 3-year stint as a graduate assistant coach at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Coach Castleman has presented at coaching clinics and coaching schools in the U.S. and abroad during his collegiate coaching career. Rob competed as an intermediate hurdler and middle distance runner for Michigan State University and the Pacific Coast Club of Long Beach between 1971 and 1987. He earned 5 NCAA All American distinctions in 3 events and was twice ranked in the top in the world for the 400-meter hurdles by Track and Field News. His American collegiate record in the indoor 600-yard run endured for more than 20 years. Rob earned 13 Big Ten individual championship titles from 1971 to 1974 and was undefeated in individual titles. Rob resides in Pullman, Washington, devotes his time to his wife Jessica, 4 grown-up sons who have come to appreciate how their horizons have been broadened by their father, and also 2 grandchildren. He is an active volunteer in the community, including officiating college and high school track meets. He is a member of the Michigan State University Sports Hall of Fame. Following his departure from full-time collegiate coaching, Rob served as a student affairs officer until his retirement in 2015. His encouragement to find mentors in one's life journey is the wisdom he desires to give others. Hi, this is Peter Godinez, your host of Your Pivot Journey, and we're doing another interview with one of my favorite people from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo who actually coached me, and that's Coach Rob Cassleman. Rob, let's get right into the questions. If you're an audience, you're watching this, we just got through with the most incredible Zoom call that I've ever been on, where roughly 50 of athletes and coaches were on the same line, right. And it was so inspirational. And actually, Rob is the first of many coaches that I'll be interviewing with. And I'm going to be basically asking the same questions. But Coach Miller, Coach Steve Miller, somebody I'm sure a lot of you know, actually gave a closing part. But that inspired these interviews. And so, Rob, the first question I wanted to ask you was, aside from the influence of others, the influence you had on you, what were some of the core gifts and traits that Coach Rob Castleman, gave to athletes and fellow coaches who had the opportunity to connect with you? So basically, what was the core of you, Coach Rob, that you realized that you were giving back to a program that obviously we all took from?
Well, I have to say, Peter, that I was a baby coach, so I hope to be forgiven. I suspect that since I was also competing in those years that I coached at Cal Poly, some of my athletes appreciated that I was committed as an athlete. I had a certain seriousness that I tried to bring to the coaching as well, without lording it or being a bore. Maybe they saw that if that guy can do it, I can do it. So a lot of it was about, just showing up and giving a good, effort every day. And I mean, they could see that I was, running at the Pepsi Invitational down at, UCLA and things like that. Because I other than the workouts and things, I was really trying to figure out, what it meant, to be coach. And I just basically showed up and tried to, give a good, give a good workout or, pat on the back, whatever it was, on a day-to-day basis. So maybe consistency, commitment, I think. Just a little aside, I remember, I was a graduate student there, and there was a day that I don't know if it was just the graduate students. A lot of people wanted to go out and enjoy a spring day out at Avila Beach, and everybody was going to show up. And for some reason, I don't know, I couldn't get the ride that day. So Coach, I was borrowing this small motorcycle that it went around a lot. You remember it, the little Yamaha 100 or something like that. And I figured I'd take this thing out to the beach, and by golly, it kept overheating and breaking down. It probably took me, an hour and a half, 2 hours to get out there. And then I, calculated the time I need to get back. So I was there about long enough to put my blanket or my towel down, get up and get back on the motorcycle and get back for practice that day. And this woman I was dating at the time later asked, Steve, it's like, kind of like, what's up with Rob? Like, how come he was only there like 10 minutes? He just got to show up every day. And I think Steve, he kind of chuckled telling me, that story is that's kind of like, that's just what you do, when you're trying to achieve something, and, it requires a certain level of commitment. So anyway, just that maybe, somebody pulled that off me a little bit, that I had a purpose, and, I expected that the guys that I worked with, had that similar level of commitment, when they showed up every day. So that was one thing that comes to mind.
Build since I was, if you were a baby coach, that meant I was totally like an infant or something like, or in the embryo stage, because, I remember you as a coach, and I'd only add on very quickly that you were approachable. And, I don't know if that's something you can get away being the head coach, but Coach Rob Cassleman, you were very approachable. And that was an incentive to be able to say, I'm going to give this guy, my all. And, I
Yeah,
just,
I think that's that was, what I recognize as one of my roles as an assistant coach. It wasn't the only time, that I was an assistant coach, but I think, sometimes as the head coach, is the person who's the lawgiver. They hold the pocketbook as far as, financial aid awards, those kind of things. And so, yeah, I was, I was trying to be the human influence there. And hopefully, maybe people felt a little easier approaching me than they did the head coach, which is a very typical thing. And those roles changed as I, later became a head coach in my own right. So
add on. And, I'd only add as I'm listening to other athletes and coaches that a key to a success of a coach is knowing that your athletes are actually pursuing acceptance from you. you know
oh
and
gosh.
again, I was inspired by Danny Aldridge's comment. You just mentioned a sub-minute a miler, and his big reward was he was looking forward to that big huge bear hug he was going to get from his coach. And just the same thing, Coach Rob. It's like, remember the Gates story where he says, hey, if you're not running, then just keep on running out of that gate. And it was that need to be loved and accepted. And again, back to you, Rob. I don't know how you carried that on now being the head coach, but that seems to be such a key to your athletes. And
Yeah,
even
we have so much power in what we can do, for good in terms of validating, young people. And I think, that there isn't a better, field than education or coaching, and no less a field that is, ripe for abuse. And we've obviously are seeing in the headlines, over the last years, how that responsibility, uh, can be abused. But as our social institutions, including family life, begin to unwind at at some level, I think that, young people need validation, need to know, that they're worthy beyond, what they can produce. And, that certainly goes along with, with the performances. So when Danny was expressing, he was looking, for validation beyond just, running under a 4-minute mile and things. And so I didn't appreciate, I think at the time, like I do, now, as I've had my own children, I have my own grandchildren. I've been in I was in education, both in the K through 12, as well as the university level for decades. And, that is such an important responsibility, that we have to take seriously, as, the ability to give validation, to people who are seeking that. And, I think it doesn't matter how good an athlete in terms of success is. Everybody looks for, that sort of thing. And so if I had any, success that we're passing that on, it might have been, totally serendipity, because I was a baby coach. I don't know, how I could use that, maybe like I did later in my career. But it was an interesting comment that you make. And I think it's just so incredible that we be involved in, young people's lives, in ways that can provide validation and positive affirmations to their struggle with trying to figure out who they are, what they're going to become.
Leads to the next question I was going to ask you. The responsibility of the coach is to teach the techniques, the form to improve people's performance in the event they've chosen to run and do quite well with it. I mean, besides those techniques, how would Rob Cassleman in his coaching career equate to the same thing if Rob Cassleman only taught you track and field? But there was more to than the track and field that you were coaching in the athletes. Can you give us a little touch of what you believe that you passed on besides the techniques?
Well, and maybe I'll just give you an example of my last career, which was in international services. So I worked with international students, undergraduate, graduates, visiting research scholars, what have you. And I think what made me successful at what I was doing there was to convey a sense of mutual respect, that everybody, every man, every woman wants to be, treated with respect. And what I'm saying is I understood the power that I had, to make people's lives, better. At that time, I don't know if I really, realized how, important that is. And of course, you have a coach, athlete relationship, which requires, a certain amount of separation as well. I think relationship is the key. Balance, obviously is important, but there's certain, kind of ground rules. And so I think maybe that comment you made about being approachable had something to do with that. I don't know, but I think that respect is also related to authenticity. I think athletes, know when you're, being honest and authentic, with them, and and it gives you the ability to tell them, when they're, not, when you might make a critique on them, that it's more than just making a comment that they didn't do the right thing. It's when they understand that you have their best interest in mind, then you have the ability to critique as well as make a positive comment that they believe, that they understand that you really meant that their trail leg was, going in the right place, and you're just not making it to, make them feel good and things. So those are a couple of things that I suppose out of the millions of, lessons, I guess, that you learn, as a coach. Steve would also say, "I love you." Now, how many men, at that time, he was radical. I love getting a hug, from Steve Miller as well. For me, at that time of my life, it probably wouldn't have worked, with you guys. It just didn't. I wasn't, ready to be authentic, maybe, with that, or as comfortable at myself. But he appreciated his ability to validate you by doing those kind of things, and it was very powerful.
Before we all met Coach Miller, we were all individual souls bringing something to the table. We got influence, we contributed, but then we needed to go out on our own, whether it was going to be a coach
Absolutely.
or a teacher
That's right.
or a business
Yeah.
person or a parent. It's just that I think what we're trying
Certainly,
to
but you
accomplish.
never forgot him.
No,
And just, that experience, I think, I'm sure I thought back in times when I was coaching, or maybe just, as being a parent or something like that. I looked to those, those people had a big impact on my life, so Steve and I, remained friends.
hmm
It's just that I had to, create my own um, style, and I had to, kind of break out of. And let's face it, here is a guy who is very charismatic. I mean, I haven't, met but a couple of, individuals as, had that kind of a gravity that, that he did. So.
so Coach Rob, another question. It says, what advice would you give to coaches just starting out or people who are considering a career in coaching?
So I think coaching will make a lot more sense to you if you see it as a profession that serves athletes rather than serving yourself. And if you're only chasing wins, you're going to miss out on what it is that makes coaching rewarding, and creates those memories that endure over time. My advice is to dedicate yourself to the profession, whether you're coaching full time or part time, whether you're a dad, doing a soccer league or whatever. And I will also say, in adopting a style or philosophy, be flexible, and realize that you'll need to adapt to your own style. Now we've talked about this, and that, the fact that those, what it might have been 5 or 10 coaches that were on that, that call earlier, Peter, are now coaching at some level, university, Pac-12, coaches who, we recognize. And I'm sure to a person, they'll say the same thing, that they took, what made sense, to them from their experience as an athlete at, Cal Poly, and then they had to, adapt to their own. So, coaching is simple in many ways. You show up every day, learn your athlete's name, be consistent, be positive, but you also have to be patient, because people are complicated, and learning about dealing with people can't be learned from a book. It requires experience, and it requires failures. I mean, we really learn more from our failures. If we have some super talented coaches or athletes, and they go out and, they win what they're supposed to be, sometimes it leaves you scratching your head going like, well, was that the workouts that we were doing? What did we do here? So, and I think virtually all coaches will tell you that they became better in the passing of years. If you really want a lasting experience, realize that it's in those relationships that you develop and nurture in just a short period you have in most cases. If we're talking about a school team or a club team, you really only have them for, a few, years and things. Another thing I would say is that in my own experience as being an elite athlete didn't give me a lot of insight in how to coach others. one of the first things I learned was that everyone I coached was not as dedicated or skilled as I was. So right away, I learned that the workouts that worked for me as an individual weren't necessarily going to work for the people, that I coached. Okay. I needed to decide pretty quickly whether, whether it was going to drive me out of coaching because people, weren't going to succeed in the workouts I was giving them a day or meet the expectations. Whether they had jobs on the side. I mean, whether they were, married or had all these responsibilities, whatever it was, or whether I would adopt that and see it as a challenge, as sort of an adventure. Later, after I did 18 years of coaching college, the local high school coach asked me to come and help, with the team here. And I said, Mike, I've been ducking that drama for 18 years. I don't think I could have anything to do with high school kids. And so the next year he came around, I said, Rob, have you thought any more about, coming out to college? I said, I'll give it a shot. So I did that for 8 years, and it was a fantastic, rewarding experience.
Wow.
Coach, but the point I'm going to make is, here are kids, and we had state championship teams, state championship kids, but we let everybody come out, and the challenge was just take what you got and meet the kids where they were. Some of them were out because they were really dedicated football players in the fall, and so we used them as sprinters. Some came out because their friends came out, and they turned out to be they discovered that they were very talented as track performers and things. So you have to, I think, I found that challenge, that if I could get over the ego part of it, that I would have, a really rewarding experience. And that was how it panned out. I think the biggest mistake I made as a young coach was focusing too much on whether my athletes were doing my workouts the way I wanted them or the way I thought they were supposed to be. So in time, I learned read my athletes, in terms of, were they ready on a particular day? Were they capable? What good is a workout that stopped in the middle because, those kids couldn't, they couldn't finish, that day. And I don't mean that sometimes you have to take, them to their limits and things like that. But I mean, if you're consistently stopping, workouts halfway through because, they can't do what you're asking them. So you're not really, getting to know who your athletes are, what their physical, capabilities, their mental capabilities. So here's a Cal Poly experience. Listen to them. This is, I didn't have a great appreciation. I remember a specific workout I was given the fall track sprinter hurdler guys on hills. And I thought it was more specific to, what they were going to do a 300-meter gradual hill, maintaining a higher speed, but just kind of like sort of in a sense having a weight pack on their back, but running, quite fast. And later I heard them talking about running to the P. You remember, was it a P or something like that? With awe and pride. And I realized that it was important to incorporate the ideas, that they had for what, they felt, would make them good as well and things. So I think that, again, you learn those things.
Rob, just one of the final questions. We're running out of time here, but I want to ask you the question: how do you want to be remembered as a coach?
I guess I hope I was communicating a sense of respect to those young men. I treat you with respect, and then we can meet in a common ground and, work on the challenge at hand. I also hope I communicated a sense of gratitude that I was lucky, to be there at that time in my life. Coach Miller was fond of saying, it's all relative. You remember how many times he said, and I know whatever shortcomings we had facility-wise, budget-wise, like compared to the D1 programs, we were aiming to be competitive with. We weren't just thinking D2 teams. We, went out and dueled and beat Fresno State, University, and we were quite a, good team. But it's also important to appreciate the positives that we had, and we had good coach, good athletes who got along for the most part. Excellent school, gorgeous physical setting. And the reality of life is that we have no control over the circumstances that, we're born to. What I'm saying is we could have been born into a refugee camp on the border of Syria or on a Mediterranean isle and things like that. So I, hope that sense of that feeling of gratitude that I had, and then, maybe the sense that we're obligated to give something back, pass it forward and things. And again, just in that Zoom experience we had a couple of weeks ago, I had a really good feel about what people were saying coming out of that experience, and I'm confident that they did bring those things into their life, regardless of what occupation that they had, whether they were parents or grandparents or uncles. And so anyway, those are a few thoughts I have.
Running out of time here, and I just really appreciate the time you gave us, Coach Rob. I really believe that as much as it's great to think nostalgia and wonderful thoughts of our past at Cal Poly and beyond, I just really have this dream and hopes that all these interviews and the collaborations we're having are going to make a huge positive difference in the strain, this uniqueness of what's going on in our world today. And again, I'm not trying to get any platform, but I'm just hoping that some positive will come.
Absolutely.
Thank you for stopping your run and sitting down with me for an hour and talk about some deep things.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for the opportunity.
So with that, this is Peter Godinez along with my coach, Coach Rob Cassleman, with Your Pivot Journey. Until next time, thanks.